We're here at a march in the center of Budapest in Hungary. There's an election just around the corner. All of these people here are saying they want the current Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, to stay in power. But after 12 years in power, it looks like his position could be in jeopardy.
Fearing Orban's increasingly tight grip on their country, several opposition parties have formed a broad coalition to try and beat him. The election's on April 3rd, the same day as a referendum on a law passed last year that prohibits teaching LGBTQ topics in school.
Do you know about the referendum, the school referendum?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
The Hungarians want to protect the children from any influencer and any transgender stuff.
Ez most nem jelenti azt, hogy elítéljük azt, aki nem ilyen, de egy alapdolog az egy család, alapköve férj és feleség és a gyerekek, a család.
Nem támogatom. Apa, anya, meg gyerekek. Nincs más. Hogyan legyen fiú gyerek? Ha csak két férfi lesz. Nem átfigyetek már a gyerekeket.
The EU has sued Hungary over this anti-queer law, but Orban doesn't seem to care.
Egységesek vagyunk, és ezért meg fogjuk nyerni a népszavazást is, amellyel a nyugati világon végig söprő gender őrületet, gyerekeinket pedig hagyják békén.
Others are adamantly against the legislation.
This group's trying to educate people all about the referendum in Hungary, and you won't believe some of these questions that the government is asking people to vote on. Just a couple. Do you support showing sex change content to minors? And are you happy with kids being shown sexually explicit media?
Luca Dudic is an executive board member of the biggest and oldest LGBTQ organization in the country, the Hater Society.
Why is the referendum on the same day as the national election? What's going on?
So this is a way for the government to mobilize its voters, unfortunately. I think they see this as an opportunity to kind of fuel people's maybe will to vote because the questions are so controversial and so manipulative. The government has been using social minority groups as scapegoats for the last 12 years. It has been Roma people, homeless people, refugees and migrants. And since 2019, I think that's when the fear and the panic around the refugee crisis kind of died down and they had to pick a new enemy.
What is it like to be an LGBTQ person in Hungary?
So in Hungary, LGBTQI people are unfortunately very much discriminated against in their everyday lives. So you can get like verbally assaulted in the street very often. And unfortunately, since the anti-LGBTQI legislations have started, they have become more and more regular because I think that this very homophobic and transphobic minority feels very much encouraged by the government's propaganda.
Since 2010, Orban's been sliding Hungary towards authoritarianism. He's practically eliminated checks and balances in government, been accused of tampering with elections, and gotten most news media to support him. Chipping away at LGBTQ rights is part of the strategy. His government has outlawed gay marriage and banned trans people from legally changing their gender, emboldening a far-right group to, for example, remove the rainbow flag from Budapest City Hall.
Na hát levele! Fel a győzelemre elég volt a homoszexuális provokációból és a homoszexuális propagandából.
The new anti-LGBT education law is so vague, TV channels worry it could limit them showing popular movies and shows. In other ways, the impacts are already evident. A parliament member shredded a children's book about gay parents, and it went viral.
So when did you first come to this bookstore then?
When I was a kid, it was one of my favorites.
When Boldazar Nagy put together that book of diverse fairy tales, he didn't expect it to sell out in the first week.
Oh, but now they are separated in the top of the shelf, so not a kid could reach it.
He also didn't expect the backlash. Book readings cancelled after right-wing protests and the publishers receiving death threats.
No, it wasn't here before. It was among the other children's books, but you know, since this new law came, they had to put it to a separated place.
How does that make you feel?
It feels like my childhood when I don't feel that I'm any of the others. I don't want kids to feel that they are separated. It's the exact thing that why we did this book was for these kids who feel different to feel that they are not different.
Úgyhogy át is adom a mikrofont Magyarország reménybeli következő miniszterelnökének, Márki-Zay Péternek.
An alternative future for Hungary looks like this. Peter Márki-Zay is the leading opposition candidate. That's thanks to 6 parties who have united behind him, despite having little in common except their hope of taking Orban down.
What made you want to run for Prime Minister?
Well, it's not my own personal ambition. It's more about, saving my country. Orban brought us so much, out of democracy, out of Europe, out of rule of law, out of market economy, that we just have to bring us back to European values, bring us back to normality. And, that one is a common program.
But Márki-Zay is a conservative Christian and formerly voted with Orban's party, so getting progressive support is a bit complicated.
We've spoken to some LGBT people in Hungary who say they're worried that if you do get into power, that you won't prioritize them.
Well, depending on what you mean by prioritizing, we have 10 million people. I wouldn't prioritize one over the other. But one thing is certain, that the LGBT community is under attack by Orban, by hate campaigns. And we were the ones, and I personally was the one who did the most to defend them from all these hate campaigns and propaganda.
So if you do come into power, then you would change, or you try to bring in same-sex marriage, and you'd also potentially try to change it for same-sex couples so they can adopt.
Okay, so there's 199 representatives in the parliament. Probably not in the next 4 years, but life for homosexual couples, for LGBT community members, will be so much better after a regime change.
The latest polls put Márki-Zay slightly behind Orban, which means the referendum on LGBT rights is likely in the same position. A bad sign for people who can't wait any longer for change.
This is a big house.
Actually, it wasn't that big before. When we moved here, we were just 2, my boyfriend and me. But then we decided that we'd like to have a family, some kids. So we built some new rooms. So we started to buy a lot of toys, and kids' books and board games. Our plan was this will be my little room and this will be the kids' little room, so we will be next to each other and we can play here and play there.
And what's the latest with the adoption process?
It took 3 years to wait, and now there is this new law that actually ban same-sex couples and single people to adopt kids in Hungary. So
what are you going to do with this big space now?
We plan to move from here because, not just because the adoption, but this whole situation in Hungary. So we started to think about moving when these new LGBTQ laws came out. And since the book has been published and all these scandals around it, there are just more anti-LGBTQ laws, so we are stronger than before in our decision that it's not our place anymore.
It's time to go.
Even if the opposition will win, I think it took years and decades to really change the society, and we don't have time because we are getting old and we want to live a happy life.